Hi, everybody. Well, here we are. I'm with Christina Patrin, and we met at the CEC convention, and we discovered that we both have a tree in our logo.
Yes.
So, Kristen, you have Emergent Tree. Tell us what's the tree?
Yeah. Emergent tree is the tallest tree in the forest. It's the one that kind of surpasses the canopy, if you will. But our tree actually starts at the root system. What we were thinking, or the founders were thinking as they designed the origin of our organization is, you can see the trunk of the tree. You can see the leaves and the branches of the tree. And, the further you get in education, you can grow, lots of trees and lots of branches. But fundamentally, what people miss is the root system. And the root system is what makes that tree healthy and thrive or atrophy and struggle. And so that's that underlying piece that impacts so many pieces of our education system that if we don't actually nurture, curate, cultivate our root system, then our tree is left with limitations. And so the emergent tree has the strongest root system and it thrives in the forest and kind of goes beyond its expectations. So that's our theme for emergent tree. Yeah.
I love it. Oh, and there's some parallels with mine because we have the joyful inclusion tree. We start with the roots that actually are visible
Yeah.
and that the roots are your vision and your mission and what you're committed to. And then the trunk is what you stand for. And
Oh,
then the branches are all your capabilities. And then the leaves are all of the results that you produce, the outcomes.
oh,
So
fantastic.
we have a little growing tree with a heart in the center.
I love that. Yeah.
So, yeah. So, what a coincidence that we run into each other. I heard your presentation. I was impressed. And some of the things that I took away from your presentation ended up in an earlier blog post. So, thank you for those.
Thank you.
Um, but I want to get into a little bit of that. But first, give us a little background about you.
Yeah. So I'm a traditionally trained teacher. I actually went into the profession knowing from like age 7 that I wanted to teach, right? I would practice school when I was very little. And so
Yeah,
when
me
I,
too, me too, me too.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the great thing about that is that my little stuffed animals were such great listeners, right? Big, bright eyes and had the best attention ever. They
And
were
they were never defiant, right? They
exactly.
were compliant. They did
Um, I
everything.
graduated in December in the middle of the school year, and so I was hired, and I took the first job that came up, and I was so eager, and that was a 180 from what I practiced at home, right, with my little stuffed animals. I started as a middle school reading intervention teacher, and my middle school students had lots of behaviors, and I didn't know what to do. And I struggled a lot. And so after about 3 years, I was ready to quit. I had no behavior skill sets, no training, no resources. My toolbox was just try this, try that, try this, try that. And it was when our school started to partner with Emergent Tree and our behavior team started to get the training that they needed. And I as a reading teacher, I said, I need that. I need that information in my tool belt. So fast forward, here I am, the director of coaching, helping school districts all over the U.S. grow their behavior systems. So it's really full circle for me.
How cool. What a
Yeah,
great story.
yeah. Thank you.
Mine started similarly. I started as a seventh grade English teacher
Okay.
and had a traditional preparation. And I expected my students, and there was just like tiny student teaching with the teacher still in the room, so the kids were all behaving.
Yep.
Um, but having my own class, I was not prepared and I didn't know what to do. Now, I started teaching before there was a special ed law. And so there were kids with attention deficit and learning disabilities and all kinds of disabilities that weren't labeled. We didn't know what to do with them. but I was determined. And then when the special ed law passed, I became special ed certified and then became a special ed department chair. And then I was a transition coordinator, placing kids out on jobs and helping them advocate for themselves, thinking, why didn't I teach them advocacy when I was in the classroom? Then I was the state transition specialist. And then I finished my doctorate and became a professor of special education and the director of a special ed graduate program, prepared all of my students so they would be ready. Um, Retired from there, went to another state as the state inclusion specialist.
Mm.
And people said, we don't want graduate courses. We want to know what to do with this kid. We want to know with this co-teacher. We want to know, like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I had to like start over. But that fed my love of helping leaders and teachers. So for the last 20 years, I have been consulting, and Joyful Inclusion is across the country. And so similar pattern to yours, but I have a team that pushes in and provides coaching. And we're making a difference. One school, one teacher at a time.
That's fantastic. That's all it takes, right?
Yep. Well, that's the only way you can do it. You
That's
can't,
right.
yeah. So here's what I took away from the CEC presentation that you did. There was a lot of what you said, but one of the things that I heard you say, I think needs to be like on big banners, and that is people are getting something wrong about MTSS, about the PBIS part, the positive behavior supports.
Mhm.
So would you share, and if you have some slides to share, that would be great. Like,
Yeah.
share with us what you think people are getting wrong, because I think you're right.
Thank you. Well, something that we, in consulting and in coaching, you have to be able to convince somebody that what you have is the right thing. And I felt like we were hitting some roadblocks, right? Where people are pretty stuck in their ways or really committed to their mission. And their mission isn't wrong. In fact, I think most of the time we're on the same page. We're just coming at it from a different lens. And so, in the moment when misbehavior happens in the classroom or in the hallways, we're looking for a solution, a quick fix to address that behavior. We've got to think broader than that. One of the things I think people misunderstand about PBIS and multi-tiered systems of support for behavior is that philosophical piece. When we're addressing behavior, we need a solution in the moment. Sometimes we need a quick fix, but we also have to pause and step back at the broader aspect and see, what is actually improving behavior long term and not just, addressing it in the moment. So one of the things that we often reach for is a disciplinary tool, is a disciplinary response to misbehavior, right? That can look like a detention, an in-school suspension, an out-of-school suspension. And in fact, the more we reach for that tool, the higher it has to increase in intensity for it to be effective. Or we reach for an empty threat, right? You better or else. And there's this threat of punishment that's hoping to keep the behavior away. But we
Or
know,
I'm going to call your mother.
right, and I lose my authority when I say that, right? So we know that those practices aren't inclusive, right? They're usually exclusive in nature. And in fact, they're reinforcing some underlying misbehavior, right? I kind of like being in the principal's office, or I like being in school suspension, or call my mom. She hasn't given me attention in a little while, those kinds of things where that misbehavior is actually reinforced. So this is the part that we get wrong, is that we often then swing to the other side of the bridge and use our motivation or relationship to hopefully change behavior. And so sometimes we over rely on external pieces, stickers, trinkets, rewards, things like that. But we also create this codependency. And this is where I actually got stuck a lot of times as a middle school interventionist. I tried to help my students do better, and I would organize their backpack and kind of clean up those things for them. And I found myself in 3 weeks doing that again and in 3 weeks doing it again, and in 3 weeks doing it again. And then once I started actually working as a behavior interventionist, they would call me, come, rescue this kid, and I'd pull the kid out. They'd do all their assignments back in my room. But the minute they went back into that classroom to generalize their skills, they weren't able to. They could perform in isolation in a controlled environment with lots of structures and supports, or with their preferred adult, but they didn't have those skills to generalize. So they were motivated to work for me, or I had this trinket or prize or reinforcer that motivated them to work, and they weren't able to, use that skill set with others. And so this idea of discipline and motivation puts us at odds with each other, right? You're too harsh on kids. Well, you're not harsh enough. You're not structured enough. And so we're really battling the outcome of behavior. And what's missing, the gap that exists, is that instructional approach, where when we know we have to teach a skill gap academically, we teach, we scaffold, we provide some support, some instructional supports, but we do a lot of practice and review with feedback and reinforcement to say, wow, you're on the right track, or a little bit more this way, or a little more like this. And so there's a lot of opportunities for rehearsal and practice. And for misbehavior, we go to discipline or motivation, expecting those to change the outcome without really pausing and teaching and rehearsing, and then, of course, reinforcing. So just that shift in thinking is, I think, what a clearer outcome of behavior support is.
I love this way of thinking about it because we do either shake the finger or do whatever the discipline is, or we motivate them like, if I pump you up enough, you will automatically change your behavior and do the kinds of things that I want you to do, without actually looking to see what skill is the student missing, what does the student need to be instructed in, and and we know what good instruction is, as you said, academically.
Mhm.
I love that.
And you
So
can still have both, right? I can still have a reinforcer, but it's attached to skill. So when I've demonstrated the skill, then I have a reinforcement for demonstrating the skill, not just because, you know, you like me. At
yeah.
the same is true for the consequence pieces. If I misapply the skill, there is a consequence, right? Whether it's I'm later to the party, or I was misunderstood, so I have to repeat myself or clarify. There still is a consequence, but I can't assume that the person has that skill without the opportunity to teach. So teaching is always the first part.
Where were you back when I was when I was stuck on this back in the good old?
I mean, it still is true today, even as a parent, even as a wife, as a partner, as a daughter, as a sister. Sometimes I misapply, and I get caught up in my own thinking, because behavior is an emotional response, right? So I have
Right.
to pause and reframe myself in whatever situation I'm in, and say, okay, what skill needs to be practiced and rehearsed here?
Yeah, that's great. Now, here's another question I have for you.
Mhm.
In your presentation,
Mhm.
you said something that I went, oh my gosh, that's so true. What you said was, don't you feel wonderful that I admire and remember what you said?
Yes.
But besides that, um, you were talking about how teachers each have their own method for tracking behavior, for motivating students, maybe instructing them on the right ways. But that when kids move from class to class, teacher to teacher, it gets very confusing. And if you're the school leader and every teacher has their own method, how do you know which method is working? And it's like all crazy. So you shared something that you do with Emergent Tree Schools
Mhm.
about having a common method for tracking positive behavior. And I love that. Would you jump ahead and share some of that with
Sure.
us?
Yeah. It comes from a standard practice. You know, a lot of industries have a standard practice. Like, for example, people who are on a construction site, there is a standard of practice for construction workers. You've got to have a green vest and steel toe boots and covered pants and a hard hat. Those are the
The fancy hat.
standards
Yep.
of the industry. And I think what's hard about education is that we do have standards that are curriculum standards that are pretty consistent from place to place. Now, I live in Texas, so we have our own curriculum standards, but there's that. But what we're left with a lot of times for classroom strategies is we're left to our own devices. And so here's some examples of what happens, particularly with reinforcement or an acknowledgement system, is that teachers will create a system that they think is effective. And, based on whatever situation they have, it might be a clip chart, a store, a ticket system, a point system. Sometimes what happens with these is that they're not necessarily connected to that instructional approach, that skill set. And so my value, my points are earned subjectively. It's not clear how I'm earning that reinforcement, what I'm doing to to earn that point. The other thing is that the currency is different. Sometimes it's tallies, sometimes it's marbles in a jar, sometimes it's tickets. And even at the elementary level, kids are transitioning from place to place. They are moving from classroom to classroom. And so the systems don't align. So someone like a PE teacher, someone who has multiple classrooms is having to manage. Well, in kinder, we use points, and in fifth grade, we use bucks. And so they're having to learn all the different systems. So the currency isn't the same. It's not connected to skill, and it's hard work, right? Just to create a system. So what we do
I
is
want to
that,
say one other thing that you pointed out that is, I'm looking at some of these, and there's public shaming going
yes,
on in some of these that
yes,
I've thought about before, but when you said that public shaming, say a little more about that.
yeah. So the clip chart or anything that is publicly calling out students for misbehavior, you're connecting that attention to the undesired behavior, the behavior I don't want, right? So I'm calling out, hey, Christina, you're not paying attention, go change your clip. Hey, Christina, you're not doing your work, go change your clip. One, I'm giving them more opportunities to not do the work or not pay attention or not do those things. But now I'm naming the misbehavior instead of naming the behavior I want. So that goes back to that instructional approach. Is me as the classroom teacher, I've got to think about the skill that I want to replicate from not just kid to kid, but from Christina day 1 to Christina day 2, Christina day 3. And so rather than calling out that misbehavior, I've got to flip it and call out the desired behavior. So we use a standard practice. We call it the feedback board. Here's a couple of different examples. Um, it can look, in any format, but we try to do a couple of things. The main thing is that it's connected to skill. And so you've seen here on the top left, it says being extra safe and honest, putting away all electronic devices in a timely manner. So the teacher attaches a skill to that contingency, to that tangible, if you will. And then I'm giving feedback. Every time I see my students demonstrate that skill, I might give you a Post-it. And then you write your name on the Post-it and you put it on the board. And then once it's filled, then we have a class-wide celebration. So something simple, right? Low cost, easy, doesn't take a lot of instructional time. There's a couple of things there, is that now from class to class to class to class, all the teachers are using this type of system. You can use a dry erase marker, you can use a Post-it, you can use, I see some classrooms with Velcro stars or things like that. But it's a simple, we're all working off of a board of 50 or all working off of a board of 100. It's easy to track, and it's all connected to that skill instruction that our school-wide team has agreed upon.
So let me ask you a question. On these slips of paper, the sticky
Mhm.
notes or whatever they are,
Mhm.
that would have a kid's name
Yeah.
And it looks like there's more on the top center one. So it's also what they did. Is-
Yeah, and the teacher has some autonomy with that. Some teachers don't like to put their names on there. They like to keep it discreet so they can just color in the box with a dry erase marker. The one on the bottom left has a blue and teal, so they're just doing some kind of color coding there, maybe doing a little data um, disaggregation there. But in many classrooms, if I give you a post-it as I'm teaching, I'm busy teaching all the concepts, right? And I'm doing my proximity and walking through the class, I'm just going to put a post-it on your desk, but I'm going to verbally state that feedback. Hey, Christina, that was so great. Thanks for paying attention in class today. I see, your whole body listening. And I give her a post-it. Christina writes her name and then puts it on the board. So it's low lift for the teacher. All I'm doing is giving verbal feedback and teaching as I would. I've taught the students that routine and they can go put their sticky on the board. Even as young as kindergartners or pre-K, I have some pre-K classrooms that go in and put a shape, like they're learning the shapes or they're learning a little bit of their letter. So they might put the first letter of their name on there. But the idea is that we want the students to make that connection of, wow, I did this great. And this is my reinforcement. They're not getting a treasure box or a piece of candy. They're just getting that verbal acknowledgement. And that has so many research components attached to that, right?
And there's no public shame because if I'm the bad kid and my name didn't get up on the board, too bad I didn't contribute to everybody, but I'm still part of the reward. I don't have
Yeah.
to sit out because
Yeah, absolutely. The research that we use here is the group contingency that we all win, right? Kind of like a Super Bowl ring where we all celebrate. Um, a deeper level of application could be, well, if I am targeting a specific student for tier two, maybe even tier three intervention, and they need more frequent feedback, then I am going to use the name idea and I'm going to do some data tracking there. How many times is Christina's name on the board? And that's up to me, teacher, to make sure that, yes, I might have to do some private corrections, but I need to intentionally acknowledge the student for these behavior skills, for that appropriate behavior. And I've got to be intentional about that. So sometimes they'll put the little stickies on their podium or kind of pre-populate, well, who do I need to acknowledge today? So there's a lot of data analysis that you can do with this, but you can also keep it really simple too if you're just starting out.
I love it. And it's all based on the positive.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we try to keep these short.
Yes, we do.
So I think what I want to do is say thank you
Absolutely.
for sharing with us. I'm really excited that I ended up being in your presentation. I went in there because two of my teammates were presenting with you. I didn't know I was going to get to hear you too. Um, and I think what you're offering here is something really worth it that a lot of people need to hear.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah, well, thank
appreciate
you.
you.
It's been great getting to know you and connecting with you as well. It's been just enlightening to help spread our message, right? Like you said, there's so many times where we're stuck in that thinking that just isn't clear. So hopefully these ideas can provide some clarity and a way to talk about behavior, so that we're working on the same page and we're not at odds with each other. So
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Okay.